The floor is yours.
Right, okay, so I'll just set up the right. Well, basically, when I went back to Switzerland the second time, I went to these two hotels, Hotel Kulm here and Sonnenberg here. If you notice the valley here, the drop down to the water was 1,000 metres, and there was a mountain opposite going up 4,000 metres to give you a little bit of perspective at the place. If you look up on the hillside up here, sorry, there's a little wooden cottage here. I lived in this building here with the barn alongside. The barn had a water trough in front for feeding animals. There was actually no water in the house other than one small running tap and a toilet. So if you wanted a bath or anything, you used the animal feeding trough there, and in winter you had to break the ice on the trough and roll in the snow afterwards to drive you off. The reason I'm mentioning that is that during my time out in Switzerland, I discovered the water was only cold if you thought it was cold. If you didn't think it was cold, you could just get in it without any problem at all. And later on in my stay in Switzerland, I'll mention that fact again. Following being at this hotel, I was sent repairing other hotels in St. Moritz and Arosa, and in Interlaken and Wengen, and around different hotels around Lake Lucerne. This hotel is on the bank of Lake Lucerne. So that was my main work in the first year of going back. In the second year, I was the sound engineer in the Maharishi's meeting room here. But basically, he invited top scientists from around the world to give talks on transcendental meditation and bring their scientific perspectives to the technique. They had their own research department called MERU, Maharishi European Research University, and they would take brainwave scans of people practicing meditation and things like that. I mean, just to give you an idea of what the meditation was, I mean, they used to have a rounding program where you would do yoga asanas first for about 20 minutes, then pranayama, which is like alternate nostril breathing techniques, for about 5 minutes, and you would meditate for about 20 minutes. And then, you know, if you'd learnt the flying techniques from the Yoga Sutras, you would practice then for a further 20 minutes and then lie down afterwards. And if you were on a rounding program, you'd repeat that twice in the morning and once in the evening, so you were meditating about 6 hours a day. During the second year, as Mohan pointed out in the introduction, I did, if you like, fall in love with a girl who was also working on staff, and during this time we got quite friendly, and as I've mentioned in my first recording, my energies became quite sensitive, and you know, if you held hands with someone or shook someone's hand, you know, your powers of psychometry became very aware in that you you have the ability, to telepathically talk to each other if you like, or read each other's minds, or just allow your two auras to merge into one and things like that. So um, later, after the 2 year period, I went to this Meru hotel in Interlaken to do my phase one teacher training course. Before we went there, I should probably mention the fact that the girl who I became friendly with was sent to a rosa in Switzerland, and 2 weeks later I was sent there to repair damages in all the hotels and things. And one evening, she lived in a females only hotel, and the movement had its own police force called WIM, who had guards on the front of the hotel, so I couldn't go in there through the front of the hotel. So I chose to climb a drain pipe. She was living on the first floor. I chose to climb a drain pipe and climbing in over the balcony, and I spent the night in the hotel. And following the night in the hotel, at about 6 o'clock in the morning, I came back to my own hotel, and there was a man standing on the steps of the hotel, which I didn't expect at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't think anything of it at the time, and just walked past him and went into my hotel. But he gave me a knowing look, as it were. Anyway, 3 months after that, that same person became my course leader on my phase one course, the teacher training course, which I thought was very synchronistic, as it were. Anyway, during this phase one course, as I say, I lost 4 stone in weight, and mainly because of, if you like, loneliness from being separated from my girlfriend. It was a male only course, and you were supposedly being a brahmacharya, which meant being celibate while you were on the course. Anyway, but what I did notice during the course was my powers of telepathy improved a lot, and I found I was also having out-of-body experiences. Coming up to the Christmas period of the course, I had an out-of-body experience where I was overviewing my girlfriend writing a letter to me, and I could read the letter, in her bedroom. And when the letter arrived, I already knew what it said because I'd witnessed her writing it, and she sent me a shoebox full of about 50 small presents, all individually wrapped. But as I say, the course was very intensive, and the reason I mentioned the water trough at the wooden cottage on the hill was that I was having to have cold baths 2 or 3 times a day to keep myself sane while I was on the course, because of turmoil in my thoughts and things that were going on. But again, as I mentioned earlier, the water was only ever cold if I choose to think it was, and I noticed that other times in my life that I could choose to feel pain or not feel pain. It was my choice whether. Feeling pain is quite useful because you know if your hand's burning or something like that, so you don't switch it off completely, but if it's a slow aching pain, you have the ability just to turn it off and not feel it. I discovered, but what I noticed during this period was that my senses, improved, and I could have out-of-body experiences and and things. And then after finishing this course, I helped teach meditation in Liverpool they had a TM centre in Rodney Street, which was like the private medical street in Liverpool, for different speciality treatments, as it were. And I worked there for 3 months, and then this is a picture of me leaving the course. At the end of the course, I don't know if you can tell which person's me, but I'm actually the person in the centre, directly behind the person holding the picture. The picture is of Gurudev, which was Maharishi's teacher. They talk about a lineage of teachers going down, so I would be classed as, if I ever taught other people, I would hold a picture of Maharishi, because he would be the teacher above me, as it were. So for some reason, the Maharishi always referred to Gurudev when he talked about the teaching of transcendental meditation. Anyway, after teaching at Rodney Street, I was sent I was asked to go to Mentmore Towers to repair all the building services. The place hadn't been lived in for 5 years, and it was a bit run down. There was holes in the roof. The Sotheby's had said it had cost 300,000 to repair the roof. I got on the roof with a bucket of tar and some roofing felt and blocked up all the holes for about £70. And as far as I know, they never did any more work on the roof other than what I did. I mean, I went around the walls with a neon screwdriver that lights up, if you put it in a socket. I was using that and touching the plaster around all the sockets, and sometimes it lit up, sometimes it didn't. If it lit up, I'd take the socket up and check the wiring insulation and things like that. Anyway, after being there a week, there was a conference call with the Maharishi. He had, I think it was nearly 500 people out in Syria while the Americans were bombing Syria, and the Maharishi was trying to prove his 1% effect of basically 1% of the population reduces crime rates, accident rates, and brings coherence to the environment. And he was doing this live experiment. And anyway, the people in the hotel were saying, "But Maharishi, the bombs are getting closer and closer." And the Maharishi's saying back to them that just go down into the transcendent and experience that bliss consciousness, as it were, and don't worry about the bombs. Anyway, 3 days later, 250 people showed up from Syria. Before they could move into their rooms, I gave each one a bucket of paint and paintbrushes, and they had to paint their rooms before they moved in. It was an 80-bedroom, property. So within 24 hours, 80 bedrooms got painted, and the whole place looked much more renovated. I was put in charge of the video studio, which is the purpose of this article. All the ceilings, if you look up here, were all gold leaf, and all the if you read on the first page, it was built by Paxton for the Rothschild. In the Grand Hall in the centre, it had all the faces of all the prime ministers up to the time of the building being built, and gargoyles on the outside of the building. I mean, my first night living in the building, you could feel the ghosts walking through you as you were trying to sleep. And after about 6 months, they decided everyone should go to bed at 9 o'clock in the evening, and I had the job of going down into the cellars to turn the electricity off to the building. And the first night I did it, I pressed the button to turn the electricity off, and just shining a torch walking along the corridor, I discovered an oil painting of someone's tomb with a big cross over it, pointing sideways, and then I went a bit further, and loads of bats came flying down the corridor around my ears, which I found a bit disturbing. But anyway, it's a bit odd. I'm the cameraman up there, but I'm also sitting at the bottom on the left-hand side of this picture. And again, you can see the front of the building. It's now been converted into the clubhouse for a golf course. The Maharishi bought it for 250,000 with about 80 acres of land, and sold it 10 years later for 14 million. The property was sold for. So, as I say, I was in charge of the buildings, heating, lighting, and the electrics, the phone systems, etc., and also the TV studio. They even at this property, they used to invite people from the community to come for dinner and sit one of our person next to one of the guests, as it were, and they would discuss things over dinner, etc., etc. And during my time at Mentmore Towers, this long room here at the bottom was called the billiard room, and they covered the floor of that in foam rubber, and people practice their levitation techniques in that room. When I learnt to meditate myself, I think I had to go to Roydon Hall in Kent, which was actually a female premises. I mean, Mentmore Towers was male only, and again, you were meant to be celibate there. But halfway through my stay there, I'd done all my jobs, and I thought all my work was up to date. So I asked for permission to go away for a weekend to Germany to see my girlfriend. And anyway, the person in charge, whose name was Stephen Benson at the time, said I couldn't go. So in that evening of the meditation period, I suddenly burst into tears, and into the split second of me bursting into tears, there was a flash of lightning and a crack of thunder that was extremely loud, and because it was so synchronistic with my bursting into tears, I can only assume that I, in some way or other, because I had a lot of emotion pent up at the time, that I caused that to happen. And something similar happened about a year ago, where I was aiming to be a board member of my, I live in a rented house under a social landlord that used to be a council house. And anyway, there was a discussion at Bangor University in the business centre there, where I again became quite emotional, and because I wasn't allowed to be a board member at the for some reason. I tried 4 times, and they rejected me 4 times, and they actually want a board member again now, but I'm refusing to apply. But anyway, in this meeting in Bangor University in the business centre, just before I spoke, there was like a pregnant pause where I tried to gather my thoughts, but I could feel thousands and thousands of non-physical beings running towards me, and I was certain the building was shaking, and I looked to the director of the company, and he'd turned and held onto a bar next to him, because I think he could feel it shaking as well. And again, it was only because I was extremely emotional, and I was tying into energies that were causing, almost like an earthquake to happen. And anyway, that's another story which we'll come to in a minute. So anyway, they were just a few things I was talking about. I know that I'm limited by time, so I better move on. Following Mentmore Towers, I was one of the first two people that went to help to set up an ideal village project in Skelmersdale in Lancashire. What basically it meant, we bought two 10,000 square foot factories and got 80 council houses all next door to each other to start the project, and then about 5 years later they came on this site and built all the houses and built the Golden Dome here. So again, there was large groups of people meditating together. The reason they chose Skelmersdale was it was one of these 1% effect experiments that Maharishi was doing. Skelmersdale was notorious for being a high crime rate area with a lot of social problems and things. So the Maharishi wanted to prove that introducing a large group of meditators would change the environment, and it did. It's now no longer got a reputation of being a high crime rate area, and all the houses that are being built now are all in about a quarter of an acre of land, and have got 6 or 8 bedrooms. It's a very desirable place to live. But anyway, coming back to the earthquake experience, when I came to Skelmersdale, I had to create my own living, and because I'd lived in Switzerland and saw all the energy improvements that they did. They had wooden shutters, triple glazing, net curtains, heavy velvet curtains. They had about 5 layers of insulation in their rooms and things. So I used that knowledge and became a government consultant, where I surveyed industrial premises. I'd been a glassworks one day, a brickworks the next. Had thermal imaging equipment doing surveys of the conditions of the insulation levels and the processes. But during that period, I also developed my skills in geothermal energy, and I had a patent for a single borehole geothermal energy system that was designed to retrofit into oil wells, and I got invited to meet Mitsubishi Heavy Engineering and go to an exhibition in Kobe in China, and in Japan, and so on the flight out there, we flew via Alaska, and as our plane took off, the volcano in Alaska erupted and closed the airport, and it was closed for 10 days. Our plane was the last plane to leave the airport before the eruption. Anyway, it took them 10 days to clean the runways, and our plane was actually the first plane to arrive back at Alaska on the return flight from Kobe. I don't know whether you remember in the news, but again in Kobe there was a very serious earthquake there. We were on a place called Port Island, a man-made island off the coast of Japan, and again, I think it was a little more than a coincidence that this volcano was trying to blow our plane out of the sky. Because I was going to Japan to discuss geothermal energy, but it could have just been a coincidence. But anyway, to me it seemed a little bit significant. Anyway, we also went to I don't know, I can't think of the name, next to Texas, Mississippi it is. The American government invited us to go to Mississippi as well, and and we flew out there with the British Overseas Trade Board, and when we got there in Jackson, Mississippi, the head person stood up and said, "I'm so impressed with you guys coming here. We're going to lend you a private jet to go around the state." And for 3 or 4 days we were flying from one county to the next, and having breakfast in one place, lunch in another, being chased by, cars being chased by lots of reporters and things, and then having to give press conferences when we arrived in each place, which was quite good fun. But at the end of the day, we did try and build a demonstration of the geothermal system. I know I probably shouldn't be talking about this on a spiritual thing, but the British government refused to back our project, which was on the island of Milos in Greece, and even though the British government had paid £11 million into the geothermal budget, and ours was the only application from the UK, the British government turned it down and the project never went ahead, which is why I then switched to helping my wife with her translation business, which we ended up employing 40 people, doing 40 languages and employing 400 people, and having a company turnover of, profit of £2 million a year, which is when we bought the farm and moved to the farm. So anyway, just moving through the pictures here, you've got the front of the Golden Dome here, and inside again it's all padded with foam, and people practice levitation techniques in here twice a day, morning and evening, and sometimes 3 times a day if there's a special course on. As Mohan said in the introduction, when I learnt meditation at Royden Hall, I was given the techniques, and instead of everyone else with just bouncing around on the foam, I left my body in a heap, and I could look down and see my body, and then I noticed I flew up through the roof, and then when I looked either side, there was a yogi on either side of me holding my hands in full lotus, and I was in full lotus, and the 3 of us flying up from the building up into the sky, and we flew so high that the planet looked like a little dot, and all the other stars in the universe you could see, and we just flew around for a while and then came back to my body again. But in that experience, one of the techniques was the ability to do remote viewing, and while I was flying I was doing the remote viewing. Another technique that you learnt at the time was the ability to walk through walls, and I did that walking through the roof, so I got a lot of very instant experiences of these cities on my first attempt at doing them, and things. So I'm not sure. I think I'll probably finish at that point, and hope I've covered everything. If you've got any questions and answers, I can try and answer them for you. I'll stop this recording.